All right, so this video is going to be talking about classification and different things involved in classification. But before we are able to actually talk about classification, we need to talk about how living things are organized. So if you look here, major living things are organized into three major groups called domains. And the three groups are archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. Quick summary of these. Archaea are things that were around since the beginning of time. So like think back to way when dinosaurs were around. These are like old school bacteria that they could still be living, some have died off, but most of them are as old can be. Then you have bacteria. Bacteria are two different types of things. Bacteria that like infect you, and the other thing that probably you're familiar with are viruses. So both of those things fit in this. And then the last group is eukarya, which is pretty much everything else. Now to make that easier, scientists split eukarya up into four groups called kingdoms. And those kingdoms are plants, animals, protists, and fungus. Now, just so you understand the difference, protists are things that live in the water and are one-celled. We are actually going to slowly look at some of those in the next few weeks. They are very simple, but at the same time they can live alone. So they are considered organisms. The next group is fungus. Fungus, you probably are familiar with, are things like mold, mildew, and mushrooms. There's other things, but those are the main three. Then you got plants, which is an obvious thing. So they're like trees and flowers and grass, and that's fun stuff. And then you got animals, which is, again, what you're familiar with. Many people that I've talked to don't understand that humans, we're animals, bro. So those are all different examples in how things are organized. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how living things are actually classified.
So why do we classify stuff? First of all, classifying allows us to keep track of the 3 to 10 million different living things on the Earth. Without classification, we would be so confused as to what things are all around us. Classification is the systematic grouping of organisms into categories on the basis of evolutionary relationships or physical appearance. And the science of classifying is called taxonomy. So basically, classification will group things according to evolutionary relationships, which just means how they change over time, and also their physical appearance, which is how they look. Finally, people have been classifying for nearly 2,000 years. All right. When we talk about taxonomy and classification, there's one major important guy or scientist that was involved in this, and that was Carolus Linnaeus, and there's a sweet picture of him up in the corner. We talked about him a little bit yesterday, but he was in charge of developing systems for naming species and organizing them into groups, and we actually still use his system today. He named over 4,000 plants and animals, and he specifically used their appearance to group species, so he used what they look like. He was considered of the father of taxonomy, and he used something called binomial nomenclature. Now, what you're going to see is on the next slide and your note sheet, I did not provide anything for you when taking notes, so this is on your own. So make sure you get a good solid foundation for your notes, because it will help you on your quiz on Monday. And yes, your quiz still is on Monday. So when we're talking about what binomial nomenclature is, there's two things you have to understand. Binomial means to name. So bi means to, nomial means name, and nomenclature is a naming system. So you put it all together and it means a to-name naming system. The language that this is in Latin, and one of the main reasons that it's nice to study taxonomy is because you can learn the Latin from it. Now we kind of talked about this yesterday. There is, for every organism on Earth, a genus and a species name, which is the to-name naming system, which is also called their scientific name. I have some examples there for you. For example, the common house cat's scientific name is Felis domesticus. Felis stands for cat. Domesticus stands for domestic, or of the home, so it's a house cat. The mountain lion, the puma, and the cougar are all kind of grouped together in a group called Felis concolor. Felis, again, stands for cat, and concolor stands for the fact that it's pretty much a one-colored animal. So it's a one-colored big cat. And finally, Felis rufus for bobcat. Felis stands for cat, and rufus actually refers to the color of its fur. So if you notice, in every one of them, there's a genus and a species name, and also they're always the genus is always capitalized, and the species is always lowercase. But both of those names are always in italics, so they're always italicized. So if you go back up and you look at the common house cat, the genus is the first name, Felis, it's capitalized. The species is the second name, Domesticus, it's lowercase, but both of those words are italicized. The genus and the species are the most specific levels of organization. So what that means is they are like their first and last name. So there are 7 levels of classification that describe a species, and we talked about this yesterday. They're kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And we talked about a way you can remember that by King Philip came over for a great soup, or something else, anything you want to remember it by. But basically what I've done here is I've taken 3 organisms. I've taken the polar bear, which we talked about yesterday. I've taken a human, which is Bill Nye. Oh, Bill Nye, the science guy. Sorry. And a doggy. Now, if you look at them, the more levels of organization they share, meaning the more levels that are the same, the more closely related they are. So if you look at the bear, Bill Nye, and the dog, they're all in the animal kingdom. So we're all the same so far. If you look at the phylum, they're all chordata, which means they all have a backbone or spinal cord. If you look at the class, they're all mammalia, which means they are all mammals. The order is the first level where they change. In the order, the bear and the dog are carnivora, which means they are carnivores, and the human is a primate, which means they can stand on 2 legs. Then the families are totally different. Ursidae and Hominidae and Canidae are all different. Then if you move to the genus and the species, these are the ones I want to focus on. So the genus and species, like we talked about in the last slide with binomial nomenclature, are the ones that are like their first and last name. Remember the polar bear from yesterday, Ursus means a one-colored fur bear, and Martimus means in the Arctic. So that would mean a one-colored fur bear that lives in the Arctic would be a polar bear. Homo sapien is our genus and species. That refers to the fact that we can, again, walk on 2 legs. Also, it refers to the size of our skull, and sapiens refers to the fact that we are humans with 2 legs and things like that. And then finally, Canis familiaris means that Canis stands for dog, and familiaris stands for of the family. So this is a family dog that lives with the family.
All right, so next step, here's what you're going to do. I hope you have notes. What I want you to do is check them, make sure you have everything filled out completely. I want you to bring your paper up to me so I can look over it, and you are now going to then take a quiz, and you get to use this paper. Good luck.